Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Vern Inge, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Now, I'm saying Center of the Universe because it's the name of the podcast, Stories from the Center of the Universe, but you and I both grew up in the Center of the Universe, Ashland, Virginia.
We did. And you live in a suburb out here now. I still live in the middle of it.
Yes, you do. You were definitely the Center of the Universe. I think when I say Center of the Universe for the podcast, I mean our conversation becomes the Center of the Universe for the time we're chatting.
Perfect.
And we're very close to the actual Center of the Universe.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Did you grow up in town?
Actually, depends on what you mean growing up. First of all, I'm not sure I have grown up yet, but
Nice.
But I moved in town in high school. My mom married a football coach at Randolph-Macon, and so my stepfather lived in a house owned by the college right there in the middle of the college, and so moved there right before ninth grade.
Oh, so where were you before that?
Moved around a bit, but my dad was a lawyer in Richmond. We lived over on the south side of Richmond. Then he decided he wanted to be Thomas Jefferson and move out to the country and practice law in the city. And so he bought a farm out in Beaver Dam next to Scotchtown. And so we moved out there for a while. Parents got divorced inevitably because he couldn't travel that far. And so we ended up moving back into Chesterfield for a while until my mom remarried and we moved back to Ashland. So it was ninth grade. I was back in Ashland.
So when people ask you where you're from, what do you say?
Oh, Ashland. Yeah.
Okay.
And I went to Gandy when we lived in Beaver Dam. So
that was a haul.
Yeah, long bus ride. It was probably an hour-long bus ride with stopping and all that stuff and taking the bus across Horseshoe Bridge on a snowy morning and all those things.
on a good weather day, that's
that's right. That's right.
Because it's still one lane, right? They haven't done anything to that bridge.
Still one lane, yeah.
Yeah, an hour. Yeah, people that don't know Hanover County that well, it is a big county.
Yeah.
And back when you and I were coming up, there were 2 high schools, 2 junior highs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and tell people it was back in the days of long distance, and it was 3 directions from Ashland. It was long distance to call within the school district because, Gumtree, Doswell area, or out to Beaver Dam and to Rockville were all long distance.
I had forgotten that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. Think about it. Nobody pays long distance anymore, but
yeah, we had calling cards back in the day.
Right.
You had to use a calling card to call out the Doswell.
That's right.
All right, so you came to Ashland as a upcoming freshman, or incoming freshman in high school, and you didn't know anybody.
Well, no, because I'd gone to Gandy.
Yeah,
so the kids who had gone to Hanover Academy, of course, hadn't gone to Gandy. I did know some of them from playing sports and stuff, but I did know the public school kids at Gandy. So and then went to Liberty. I started off because I guess Liberty was 8th and 9th grade then, so I was in the middle of that. It started as 9th grade at Liberty.
Gotcha.
So,
oh yeah, that's right. I'm 3 years younger than you. When I went to Liberty, they had just opened up 7th grade,
right?
And they kept the 9th grade there.
Yeah,
it was weird to have 7th graders and 9th graders in the same school.
Yeah.
There were a lot of girl fights at Liberty.
Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you remember girl fights?
I don't even remember that, but it was 3 years longer ago for me. But maybe that adding the 7th and 9th graders made a difference. But yeah, well, so it would have been your class. It would have been the first 9th grade at Patrick Henry, right?
I didn't go to Patrick Henry, but it would have been.
Okay.
Yeah. I left after 7th grade and went to a school in Richmond.
Oh, okay. All right.
Good times.
Yeah.
So because you knew kids, it wasn't that big of a integration for you?
No, it wasn't. And my parents got married, and mom and stepfather got married in May. So we moved in there in May. I lived literally out Rob Stiles' back door, and there were a bunch of kids in the neighborhood. So some of the private school, Hanover Academy kids, I got to know that way. So I knew a bunch of people by the time school started.
So you grew up right next to the college, and your stepdad worked there.
Yeah, like in the middle. I mean, right behind Duncan Memorial Church there, where there's a parking lot now, was the house I grew up in high school anyway.
Did you play around at Randolph-Macon a lot?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it was my stepfather was football coach and then athletic director, so I ran around and played basketball in the gym all the time or ran around in the fields all the time. So,
I did too. Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We were spoiled, actually, to have access to all that.
It was all really good, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't check for the towny kids at all. Like, my mom ended up working there by the time I was in high school, but when I was a younger kid, like 8, 9, 10, I used to go in there all the time, and nobody seemed to care that I was going in there.
Yeah, they did. And occasionally, you get the students complaining a little bit. I do remember a time or two, they're like, kick the kids out, and somebody would say, he's the athletic director's son. I'm not kicking him out. So, that was a nice perk, but rarely did they even bother with it. I think the college students probably liked having the kids around, frankly. They weren't taking up too much space.
There weren't a lot of us.
Right.
And we were just playing sports.
Yeah.
That's all we were doing.
Yeah.
We weren't causing trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So when you had your own time, you're not in school, your parents aren't telling you what to do, you're like 10, 11, 12 years old. What were you doing?
Well, of course, I was, 14 or something by the time I moved back out here. But yeah, so we'd go play football and soccer and everything else in the Science Center field there. What's that on? It's College Avenue right there. Yep. And so we'd play football, seemed like all the time, but soccer, other sports. That was the big thing to do after school. And, of course, in the evenings, everybody go to Anthony's parking lot on the weekend nights. So
that was really the only place to go, right?
Yep. It's where everybody met up to figure out where the trouble was. So
I keep screwing up the fact that you didn't live here younger than junior high school age, because I've always thought of you for 54 years of my life. Yeah. Well, I guess I knew of you when I was 12 or 13 as always being an Ashland guy. I didn't realize you came here at 14.
Yeah. Of course, I went to the schools here before and lived in Beaver Dam for 3 or 4 years before that. So
to an Ashland kid, Beaver Dam is not really the same.
Deep suburbs. I mean, way out of town.
Yeah, but you would have been in 7th grade at Gandy when I was in 4th grade at Gandy. So we actually did go to Gandy at the same time.
That's right.
Yeah, but you definitely weren't hanging out with the 4th graders.
That's right. Y'all in a different building. Back, that was the single brick building was where the 4th graders were.
That's exactly right. Yeah, good memory.
So
that was a weird campus, that whole layout.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it worked out. So soccer or football was a bigger thing for you?
Well, I played high school soccer, so for me that was the real sport. And I tell people this all the time. It's really odd. My stepfather was just the greatest guy, but was a national champions college football coach, All-American quarterback, all that stuff. My brother, me, nor my stepbrother ever played one down organized football. I don't think. We were all soccer players. My 2 brothers played in college, and
wow,
it's sort of surprising. I don't know if he was worried about head injuries back then, or maybe it was he was busy during football season and never really pushed us to play. But for whatever reason, he didn't discourage it, but none of us ever really played. So.
I think parents of your stepdad and mom's generation and my parents, they were like, hey, if you want to play, great.
Yeah.
If you don't want to play, we're not going to push you. I never felt forced to play anything.
Right. I agree. Yeah, I never felt that way.
Yeah. So. What was it about soccer that you gravitated to?
Mostly the other kids that were playing. Rob Stiles, Ted Schubert, the guys that I hung out with in high school were soccer players, and they said, come on, play soccer. So I did. So
was Zach Kennedy on your team?
Zach was on the team, but we didn't actually play at the same time. I didn't really start playing until I was a junior in high school.
And he was a couple years ahead of you?
Yeah, he was a couple years ahead, so he was gone by the time I started playing.
Yeah, I mentioned him because he's my first cousin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So. I wish you did know him because he was a trip. He was fun to be around, and he loved soccer.
Yeah,
he absolutely loved it. But it was more of a friend thing for you.
So it was just the friends, and then of course got into it competitively, and I actually just stopped playing.
Oh really?
I tore my Achilles about 3 or 4 years ago, and I played all the way through adulthood, and actually just Sunday, Easter, I had like half my soccer team that's still playing together out for Easter. So we
Good
still,
for you.
Mostly Spanish speaking, but they're a bunch of great guys, and we hang out together all the time.
That's really cool. You mentioned Ted and Rob. Who was the better of the 3 of you at soccer?
Ted Schubert.
Really?
Yeah, Ted. He was a defender, so he wasn't going to score many goals or anything, but he was really solid in the back. And we would say, Rob Stiles was a really good player too, but played more up front. And I was a late comer to the game, so I was just knocking people around.
I could see Ted being pretty tough on defense.
Yeah, very tough and strong-willed, very determined to get the ball.
Did you know you were going to college at a young age?
Yeah. That was always, clear to me. That's what I was doing.
So you were academically inclined and very serious about school?
No, I was academically inclined, not serious about school. So,
you were a typical teenager, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Well, I acted up a lot, and one of my stories from Patrick Henry was when you're a senior back then, I assume they still do it. I don't know if you get certain grades, you don't have to take the final exam. And I took physics, And I won't mention his name because it's not real flattering, but the physics teacher then didn't know how to do calculus. And if you can do calculus, all the formulas in physics are really easy. And I know how to do calculus. And he kept making me show my work, working through all the formulas. I'm like, this is stupid. I can get the answer in 2 steps. And so I got an 11 average once 6 weeks.
And to be clear, this wasn't on a 20-point scale.
No, out of 100, I had an 11 average. And so I had to take the final exam, and there was no way to pass the class with an 11 average in there. But I got the best grade in the class on the 2 final exams. He said, well, I can't flunk you. Of course, all the smart kids didn't take the final exam.
Right.
But he said he passed me. But I had some falling outs with teachers just having a bad teenager attitude. So
yeah, 11's an attention getter.
Yeah.
I mean, anything under a 60 is an attention getter.
Yeah.
11, you're like, what?
Yep. It's my parents had something to say about it.
So. I can imagine. But you were saved by the 2 finals.
Right.
Yeah.
So managed to go to college.
So you chose to go locally.
Well, it was really a blessing. My University of Richmond still has a tuition exchange program with faculty at Randolph-Macon, so I got to go there for free. So
it's a great reciprocity program.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And so I, got to go there free, and it was a perfect fit for me. Really worked out great.
So I know you and Ross Luck know each other. Yeah. By my understanding, Ross Luck is the last person from Richmond area to ever go to University of Richmond.
It's pretty close, yeah. Yeah, there may be a few other that they let in by mistake. Maybe they sent their application postmarked from New Jersey and it, got in. But yeah, that's right.
I mean, my dad went to law school there. Trip Chalkley went undergrad in law school there. A lot of people of that generation went to U of R, have awesome memories of U of R. Now, kids that are 20, 21, 22, they all know more about New York City or Northern Jersey or Eastern PA than they do about Virginia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, and part of it is those schools are, like Richmond's, so expensive now. It's just ridiculously expensive, and I'm sure they give scholarships and things, but still really hard for, most kids to go there.
Well, and it's from North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia to go there. I imagine the kids that are coming from the North, everything's expensive up there, and U of R maybe seems like a deal to them.
Probably so. Although it seems to me that all the private schools talk around the country because they're always priced almost within a few bucks of each other.
Yeah.
So.
And is it ironic that they're Baptist in the North didn't really exist? Right. I don't think they do even today. Very Catholic part of the country. Yeah. And University of Richmond was founded by Baptists, right?
That's right. And still, I think today is still technically a Baptist school, but it's... it certainly doesn't wear the religion on its sleeve. It's no Liberty University, but I think there's a certain number of the board of trustees that have to be Baptist and all that stuff. Still, I think so. Still, yeah, it certainly was when I was there. It was technically affiliated with the Baptist Church, but it was really loose. So,
what are your fondest memories of going to U of R that will not incriminate yourself or others?
Well. There are lots of them, but it's the people. The school was a great fit for me, just a great size, and I didn't do well academically, as we referenced in high school, and in fact had really good test scores and really bad GPA. So that's not a great recipe for getting into schools. But somehow Richmond let me in, and I got really good grades at Richmond because I liked the professors, challenged by the work, enjoyed it. But the people, the fraternity brothers, but others around school or in the dorms, it was just a great place to go to school, and had a great time there. So
yeah, there are a lot of schools today, and maybe back in the mid '80s, that they cared more about the aptitude of the child, especially young men, because their brains aren't fully formed until they're in their mid 20s, right? So they're like, hey. Bad GPA, it's probably because he's 16, 17, 18 in high school. He will mature, and his aptitude seems to be really high, so we're going to take a chance on this kid. And it worked out.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. I still wonder sometimes why they let me in there. But
I think it's probably aptitude, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Do you have any safe stories to talk about from your fraternity days?
Well, let's see. We had lots of fun, but I think Ross Luck made reference to his. In fact, I never knew that he and Martin Gravely were called the Duke Boys because Martin's older brother Paige and I were the original Duke Boys. And
does Ross know that?
Oh yeah, Ross. He mentioned it.
Okay,
he said that Paige and I were, and they just called them the same thing because they showed up a couple years later from Hanover County and. It was, but it's interesting because by then most of the kids were from the north.
Even then,
yeah, and the Duke Boys were, it probably wasn't on the air anymore. It might have been, but they just thought we were the funniest things in the world. So,
and the really funny thing about that is. You're going to school in your backyard, and they're kids from the north because they outnumber you, and they're making fun of you.
Yeah. Well, they to be fair, they were everybody has nicknames in college. There were worse ones than the Duke Boys.
So some you can't talk about on the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
So when did you know you wanted to go to law school?
It's funny because my dad was a lawyer, was a solo practitioner basically in Richmond, and so I thought as a kid I was going to be a lawyer, and then. As I got to college, decided I didn't what I wanted to do. And then sort of was getting near the end of college, and it was mostly like, wow, this is a whole lot of fun. Maybe I'll stick around at school for a while. And so I started thinking about going to law school and decided probably as a junior, maybe even a senior again, that I would go to law school.
Was it more about continuing school or more about learning the law or a good mix of the two?
I think it was probably a mix. First it was probably though continuing school because I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up anyway, and then but also studying the law, figuring out if that's really that's part of it is you have no idea, at least going to a professional school like that, if it's really what you want to do. And
it's a lot of money, a lot of time committed to that.
Yeah, certainly a lot of time. Back then, fortunately, it wasn't a ton of money.
Oh, really?
So I was fortunate enough then to get into UVA law school, and I shudder to tell people this. I paid $2,000 a semester.
What?
It's now $55,000, $60,000 a year to go to school there, but in the law school. But it's it was really inexpensive for me.
So, and that wasn't a special deal. That's what everybody.
No, it was state school, and that's what you paid to go to UVA law school.
So you went to UVA law school 88 to 91. Rob sent me your bio.
Yeah.
I went to UVA undergrad 87 to 91. Okay. And so you and I actually overlapped. And once again,
we graduated together.
We did. Yeah. You didn't know I existed that entire time either. And UVA undergrad was $3,200 a year.
Yeah.
So they really got crazy. You've taken up to $4,000
that's right.
a year for law school.
Yeah. And of course the in-state, out-of-state paid more, but that's right. It would have been about the same thing.
What a bargain!
So, it's just an incredible deal.
UVA law school. You and I could. I have no idea. You could tell me all the finer points of what it was like going through UVA law school, but the brand of coming out of UVA law school, and you're only paying $12,000 over 3 years.
Yep, and it was just an amazing place. Really smart people that you're hanging out with, really good professors, and great job opportunities when you come out. And the great thing about UVA law, and it's still the case, I think, is that I had lots of friends who, of course, went to Richmond because in fact we'd gone there undergrad. A lot of them went straight through, and others who have gone to other, William and Mary, other law schools around, and even some of the top ones like, Harvard or whatever, and they work really, really hard because the students are competing against each other. And literally you hear stories about them stealing books off the shelf back in the days of books so that one student could do better than the others. And Virginia just had an entirely collaborative attitude of everybody's going to learn together. We're not competing. They had what they called the B mean, which in some ways made it the whole school a joke because 80% of the class was going to get a B. And it didn't matter what you did, you're going to get a B.
Right.
And one of my roommates in law school, really smart kid, but he worked his tail off. And the rest of us were having a great time. I mean, all sorts of partying and things. And
80% B cuts both ways.
Right, that's right. And so, we're laughing at him going, you're going to get the same grades as us. And, of course, he goes off and right out of school gets a job for, more money than us in New York. And then 2 years later is working for Bank of America doing complicated securities deals. And, he ended up making millions and retired at like 45 years old. So it worked out for him.
So there's a lesson in there, kids.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Hunker down when you're in law school or any other post-grad or college to your story.
Right. Yeah, that's right. But law school was really great fun too, because good learning experience, but also great people, and we had a really, in some level, the professionals go to law school to party. You've been doing it for 4 years, you get 3 more to figure it out even more. So we had a great time.
I should have asked you this when we were talking about undergrad. What was your major?
Political science and American studies. I was a little bit of a lucky thing, I guess, but I knew my uncle was sort of a famous professor, and he actually, I'm not sure he was at Randolph-Macon by then. He had been at Michigan State, a couple of schools in Spain and different places around the world. He was chair of the English department at VCU at one time, but he was an American Studies guy and was apparently very famous American Studies. Everybody knew him in the field. And so I went down to Richmond, and the American Studies sponsor thought I was the greatest kid ever because I'm Tom Inge's nephew. And I enjoyed it. It was an interdisciplinary major where you studied literature from America and music from America and all different things you had to take. And so
really American culture.
Yeah, American culture, and it was really enjoyed that. So it worked a good fit for me, but it didn't hurt that the sponsor was going to give me every advantage I could get.
Is your uncle still around?
No, he passed away probably a year ago, but he was teaching at Randolph-Macon until basically the day he died. So, because he had gone to school there a very long time ago, and as he retired, he came back and taught classes there. But he was a couple of things he was really an expert in. I think he saw every single movie that ever came out. He would literally, a lot of them don't come to Richmond. He would go New York or other places to see them. And he was also had one of maybe the world's biggest comic book collection. He actually gave it to West Point. They had a big comic book collection in the library there. So before he died, he donated to West Point. But
does he have a connection to West Point?
No, it was just apparently they're big comic book collectors, and he wanted his collection to go, be part of theirs. But he was good friends with Charles Schultz and the Peanuts writer and all sorts of things. A really interesting guy.
Oh my gosh!
So yeah.
So I'm sorry. Every movie ever made by an American
probably. I'm sure he saw a lot of foreign films too, and he taught abroad. And one of his goals at one time was to go to every country in the world to at least visit. And I'm not sure it's possible because the country's changed so much. I don't know if he ever did that or not, but at one time that was his goal.
If you could take a snapshot of like the countries in 1978 and then visit all those, but some of them would be gone by the time you got to that part of the world.
That's right. That's right.
So political science and American studies. It sounds like American studies because you enjoyed it.
Right.
Political science you probably enjoyed as well, but that probably was a more obvious fit for a kid going to law school.
Probably. Again, I wasn't really sure I was going to go to law school, but I did enjoy the political science part too, and it got me opportunities to work. Like I worked for Elmo Cross, who was our senator from here in the General Assembly while I was in school and things like that as a result of that. So it's good experiences. Neat. Yeah, it was great experiences there. So,
and you did that while you were in law school or at U of R?
At U of R.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool opportunity.
Oh, it was great. Really great.
Not a lot of kids get that opportunity, I imagine.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And there was just sort of a legislative aid, I guess, and, one on his team. I think there was Mrs. Flippo, Carter Flippo's mother was his aide. And so, I just helped her out and sent her across out with whatever they needed.
I had no idea she was his aide.
Yep. Yeah, she was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So when you're in law school, anybody thinking about going to law school someday, whether they're in high school now or college, is it just an unbelievable amount of studying and writing and reading? It's just, you had fun, but you had to read a lot, I imagine.
So I think it is for a lot of kids, and I teach at a class as an adjunct at the Richmond Law School. I really think it is for a lot of kids. At Virginia, honestly, it's not that much. I spent my first couple of months going, wow, these are really smart kids, and I got to figure out how to get my feet under me because, they're all Ivy League grads, it seemed like, or just other really, really smart people. But once I got my feet under me, it really was not an incredible amount. And as a story, one of my future law partners told me, but he had gone to University of Wisconsin for law school, but he got married, transferred to UVA for his third year, and he shows up in class and says, there's a piece of paper going around the first day of class. He says, what's this? And it says an outline group. So what you do is there are 14 weeks of class. You sign up for one of the 14 weeks, and it's your job to go to class that week and outline it for everybody else. And everybody collects a book of the outlines, and so you got the class. Now, my trick for law school was I always went to class, that's what, frankly, I did undergrad too. I would take every class at Richmond started at 8:15 in the morning. I would take every 8:15 I could because I knew the other kids wouldn't show up. And if I was, no matter how bad I felt, I would always sit in that seat. And that was the way I got through law school too, was I always went because I felt like I just learned better by hearing it than reading it. So,
well, it's also genius because there's a relationship you have with the professor. Right. And if he sees you in there at 8:15 every time class is scheduled, and the other kids aren't coming to that 8:15, right, you stand a really good chance of getting a good grade.
I figured that out at a young age.
I'm 54, Vern, and I'm just learning this now. that I should have thought about college that way. Because I was one of those kids that didn't go to all the colleges, and they definitely didn't sign up for 8:15 classes.
Right.
Yeah, and that had to be hard because you were probably having a little fun from time to time, too.
I was, but I'm lucky. I guess in that way I've always been a morning person. Mm. So, and there were times where I hadn't gone to bed when I showed up for class, but I, rolled on through it, and then
to be young again.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So you're about to. At what point do you start worrying about the bar?
Oh, it's pretty early in law school. And one of the things about UVA, which is a fantastic school, is they don't teach you practical law. It's all theory and national law. Places like Richmond do a really nice job of teaching the students what Virginia law is and what you need to know for the bar if you're taking the Virginia bar. And UVA, they really don't. And so
why? That's a conscious decision, obviously. Why did they do that? Are they trying to attract more people from around the country?
It is. Yeah, it is certainly a national law. It's one of the top 10 of the country, however you rank them, and different rankings put them in different places, but it's certainly a top 10 school. And so, yeah, people are coming from all over the country, going to go practice everywhere. In fact, I'd say most don't practice in Virginia. A lot go to New York or D.C. or wherever. They want kids who are going to be like Supreme Court clerks and things like that, and it's an academic exercise. There's also a political, I would say, affiliation. It's what they call a law and economics school, where it's more on the conservative side. UVA and University of Chicago Law School are the two sort of leaders in that, and so you're just learning more theory. And then like Berkeley at University of California is, is what they call critical legal studies, a liberal school, and they're also theory. So you spend a lot of time talking more about what the law should be, legal theory, than you spend a lot of time talking about what it is, but nationally, not, or even internationally, but not just in Virginia.
So the bar for Virginia had to be hard for you.
Well, they do a really great job of, their paid services, but they hire really smart law school professors you spend the summer before you take the bar exam studying just Virginia law. And so, it probably was more of a challenge for me than the kids that had gone to Richmond, but it wasn't that hard. It was just a matter of, go to class again, study pretty well, and, I was managed to pass it. They don't tell you by how much, so as long as you pass, you pass.
It's a P or an F, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And so you're, I think, maybe not remembering how hard that was. I imagine those were long days that summer.
Well, the long days in the summer, but the stress is pretty high because if you don't pass, it's going to be really embarrassing. But yeah, it's. I'll say it wasn't a terrible summer. I mean, I got to do things like drive to Toronto for the All-Star game. Now, the guy I drove up there with and back, we were asking each other bar exam questions on the way up and back. But
it may be during the seventh inning stretch.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But we got to do fun things. I caddied in the women's public links championship that was hosted at Birdwood in Charlottesville that summer, and got to do a lot of fun things that summer. But when I was playing golf, I had headphones on with a Walkman where I recorded back in the day. It was a Walkman. You record recorded those classes, and it would, you could study that way. So I would go off for walks and sometimes play golf even while studying. So,
yeah. So it sounds like it was an almost always on sort of thing, even
pretty
though
much,
you got to do some other things.
Pretty much, yeah.
And taking the bar itself, is it a 1 day thing?
It's a 2-day thing in Virginia, yeah.
Okay. And how many hours do you have to take it day one and then day two?
My recollection is probably, it might be 6 hours each day. There's a morning and afternoon session each day, and it may be 6 hours, but I'm not even sure exactly what the time limits are. That was a long time ago.
How were you notified that you passed?
Back then, the Virginia Lawyers Weekly, which is still a newspaper, would publish the names of people who passed, but you would learn, somewhere it would get circulated around, that they had the list, and so you could call So every young lawyer, goes in their office, closes the door, and calls his phone number and gives them whatever, a Social Security number or whatever the code was, and ask if you passed. And probably was by name, and they'd tell you if you passed or failed, and then you could decide whether you're going to open your door again or not.
And so you called.
Yep, I called. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're waiting to comb through that newspaper,
right?
And I imagine it was listed in alphabetical order, and you're looking for Inge.
That's right.
But you called instead.
Yeah, so you find out a day or two before it prints by calling. So back then, now it's all done online, of course.
Was it, I imagine, thinking about making the phone call, the act of making the phone call, waiting for them to give you the answer had to be one of the most nervous times of your life.
Pretty stressful, yeah.
But what did they say? Did they say it like very monotone way, you've passed? Or?
I don't even remember. I just remember that I passed.
You heard pass. So
Yeah,
you're like,
right.
That's all I need to hear.
That's right. Fortunately, I was in a class of 5 at my first law firm. I think it was 5 of us, and all of us, whatever the size was, we all passed. So we didn't have to worry about somebody who didn't, which would have been tough. Even if one of your friends hadn't passed, it would be a really, really tough experience.
I mean, what a bummer.
Yeah.
Well, for all 5 of you, but especially the kid that didn't pass.
Right.
Or the young adult at this point, because you're in your mid-20s at this point.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So did you know what kind of law you wanted to get into?
No. In fact, they always say the area of law you get into chooses you more than you choose it. I did know I wanted to do courtroom work, and people I think kind of know if that's their personality or if they want to do deals and transactions. And so I knew I wanted to do courtroom work, but didn't know what area I was going to be doing. It just sort of finds you more than you find it, I guess.
Did you get into more civil early on? Or
yes. Yeah, entirely civil. I mean, I will occasionally touch on a criminal issue, but it's pretty rare for me. I'm all, business litigation is my field. I do a lot of it in sports, but it just came out of business litigation.
And that's how you started at a law school? Was business litigation?
Business litigation, yeah. I joined relatively large law firm's Richmond office and did business litigation, learned from some really good folks there. And then I went to a startup firm that grew to a pretty large firm and then blew up. After I've been there 23 years, I left, and a year later it blew up and filed bankruptcy. So it was an interesting experience. So
no cause and effect there, you leaving and them filing bankruptcy.
I hope not. So, but it was interesting experience there.
What was it about business litigation that was interesting to you?
Well, it was fun that it's in some ways kind of like playing a sport, right? You're competing all the time. Yeah. The litigation part I liked about that, and get your adrenaline going and all that, and had to perform on your feet, things like that. The business side, to be honest, it probably was because they're willing to pay me more money to do that than if you went and did criminal practice. It's great for courtroom work, but it typically is lower pay, at least to start off with, than on the business side. So I just went to a firm that was, had a program to train people and paid, pretty good money back then. So
guys and young ladies that go to firms that are really big have, and you tell me where I'm wrong, have reputations for you're going to be doing 90 to 100 hours every week for the first few years of your time as a lawyer. Was that your experience?
It's not quite that bad. I used to joke because a lot of my friends went to New York firms where it was that bad, and because out of UVA law, if you wanted to, you had a real good chance, at least during a good economy, to go up there. And I used to laugh and tell him I wanted to be the cot guy at the Cadwallader, Wickersham, and Taft firm, because there was a guy apparently who would go around at 9 o'clock and knock on your door and say, "Excuse me, sir, will you be requiring a cot this evening?" I want that job, to make fun of you clowns. But we certainly worked hard, and there were times, and still are times in my practice, where you're getting ready for trial or you're in trial, where you have those kind of weeks. But we much more closer to a 40-50 hour week at even a Richmond large firm than the New York firms are doing to the really young lawyers.
You're still doing courtroom work?
Yes.
Wow. So since you got out of law school, you've been doing courtroom work?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Are they jury trials typically?
It certainly can be. Sometimes depends on the case, and arbitration has become more popular, so I have a fair bit of arbitrations. But most of my stuff is in court, and most of it ultimately would end in a jury trial. The problem with civil practice, if you will, is that almost everything settles. People can't, especially now, it's so expensive, and there's so much risk involved. People can't take the risk of reaching a verdict most of the time. So it is smart for people to settle. And we have really good processes in place to get cases settled now. And quite frankly, judges lean on you really hard. And I just had that about 2 hours ago, a federal judge leaning on me. I'm representing the plaintiffs and the defendants both extremely hard.
How does that work where you're representing both?
Well, I'm representing the plaintiff, but the defendant's lawyers we were doing a hearing by phone, and he was making it very, very clear to us that if our clients didn't settle the case, we're a bunch of idiots, and our clients who are all over the country need to be in his courtroom Monday morning to explain why we haven't settled yet if we don't.
That's some serious pressure.
Yeah, it's and the judges will do that.
And is the judge doing that in that case? It could be a preference thing for that particular judge, or it could be, hey, this should be expedient. This should not take longer than it naturally should. Stop playing around. Let's just settle. It's probably better for everybody.
Well, he does know that it is better for everybody, and ultimately he's trying to be efficient to make the parties get the settlement as fast as possible. Sometimes, the judges don't live the case every day like the lawyers do, and sometimes it's not quite ready for one reason or another to get settled. But usually they get there. Not always. We do try civil cases, but usually they get to the place where people figure out what it should settle.
Do you have any stories, names aside, that would be extremely entertaining to the listeners of this podcast?
I'm sure that I do. I'd say, there've been I've had lots of really good experience, really interesting experiences in trials, as well as with crazy things happening, and doing the sports stuff. I just got really fortunate, ended up representing some famous athletes, and getting to do some pretty cool stuff as a result of that.
Are you like their personal attorney?
Yes. Yeah. So what I really do is represent the agents, and then the agents, when their players have trouble, they call me. So I've represented, really, I had a very famous Major League Baseball player who got in some sort of scuffle in a bar in Miami, and the problem with those guys is they're targets, right? And
sure.
So the second there's a scuffle, which he says never really happened, he's getting sued. And if he gets sued in today's world, he's going to get suspended, because if somebody finds out he was anywhere close to a bar fight, the commissioner is going to suspend him.
Right.
So what I think I'm really good at is keeping stuff out of the press, keeping it quiet. In fact, I've got one story I can tell publicly because it's all public. But Kevin Mitchell, who was MVP of the National League in 1989, I represented in litigation. He had the largest contract in Japanese baseball history, and 95 was the strike year, I think.
Sounds right, yeah.
And he got stiffed by his Japanese team because they said he was faking an injury, and he needed the money because he had 6 kids by 6 different women that he was paying child support to. And so we ended up putting him in bankruptcy. And if you've watched the show Broke on ESPN, they roll through for, it seems like forever, all these famous athletes that have filed bankruptcy. Kevin's name's not on there. and I was able to keep it entirely out of the press. And one of the things we did was put it in on Christmas Eve, put him in bankruptcy Christmas Eve, and the papers didn't pick it up on Christmas Day because they just didn't check the filings. And in fact, San Diego had a paper that checked the bankruptcy filings every single day, but they just didn't go back and look on Christmas Eve, so they never printed that he filed. And there was a story in Sports Illustrated a few years later that was talking about women who get pregnant by professional athletes, some of whom have multiple kids with professional athletes, and they did mention in there that he had filed. But other than that, it's the only time I've ever seen it in the press. So,
but you feel comfortable talking about it now?
Oh yeah, because it is officially public. I mean, it's out there, and of course he's not not even a player anymore. So, but yeah, it's technically a public filing. But
have you ever had somebody that you worked with that you like? I don't like them personally, but I still have to do my job.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I imagine that happens more often than not.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not more. It's pretty rare. I mean, maybe it's just how I like most people, but
I'm thinking the egos that come with the money and some fame.
Well, there is some of that, but most people, when you get to know them one-on-one, especially if they're relying on you for important things in their lives, are pretty decent people. Mm-hmm. Some of them aren't. There are a few that aren't, but most of the athletes I've dealt with are really deep down good people. Some of them aren't real likable to the public, including Kevin Mitchell's a really interesting one because Darryl Strawberry called him crazy. I kept telling Kevin that. He wrote in his book about how crazy he was. Like, it's hard to overcome, man. But he's so likable. He's so friendly that even the press liked him. And I tell people about the difference between him and Barry Bonds, because Barry Bonds is actually a pretty decent guy, but just was really cold to the press. Yeah. And obviously had the steroid issue, but the press hated him. And Kevin Mitchell was a way worse human being in lots of ways, or is. I don't know what he's up to these days, but he had done some pretty bad things because he was a gang member in San Diego. And there's some public stuff out there that he's done that's pretty bad, and that Darryl Strawberry wrote about. And but the press loves him, and he's just because he's real friendly and
it's that simple.
Yeah, that's right. Deal with people. So.
Yeah, you would hope that sports journalists are a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah,
but that a lot of them aren't.
No, and let's face it. If somebody's friendly to you and is staying with kids and signing autographs all day, you'll put some things aside that they're doing than the person who's not friendly to anyone. And that's what Barry Bonds' issue I think was. So
yeah, I think Barry Bonds was his own worst enemy through a lot of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know if that was his natural personality or if he just had a couple of bad experiences and said no more.
Right. And it could be. And I should say I really didn't know Barry Bonds. I mean, but just observing what was going on. So. Did
you stay in Richmond the entire time?
Oh yeah, yeah. My office has always been in Richmond. So.
Where is it now?
James Center downtown. Richmond.
Okay. Yeah. And but you live in the center of the universe.
That's right. Commute in.
So besides going to U of R and UVA, have you always lived here as an adult?
Well, I lived in the Fan when I was a young lawyer, and then got married. We actually lived in the Fan at first, and then moved to the near West End for a few years. But as soon as my oldest was born, basically, he lived a couple years, and then near West End. But we moved out here when he was getting anywhere close to school age, and my other two were. My middle one was born right before we moved out here in '99. So.
And you moved to the house you're in now?
Yeah, '99. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been there for almost 24 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So before we started recording, you were telling me about what's written in the deed for your house.
Well, that's what they told me. The title guy told me that the deed for the houses on the railroad, the old ones there, that you have a right to flag down a train and take a ride to Richmond. So
I think it's only funny to people like you. By the way, I didn't mention that Silent Rob is with us tonight, and he does have a live mic tonight, which is unusual. But you're welcome to come in whenever you want, Rob. It's funny to us to hear that story. People that didn't grow up near railroad tracks are like, "What are you talking about? Who cares?"
right.
But it's a wonderful house. Well, tell the story. And you reminded me. I knew the story of why Ashland became a thing, but tell the story of the origin of Ashland.
Well, I think it sort of existed as a crossroads for a long time, but the railroad really tried to turn it into a resort anyway. And we didn't talk about this before, but see, the Henry Clay Inn is up there, which is a replica of the original one. And I've noticed, I don't know if you paid attention, they have these signs that they'll put old advertisements, and it talks about the hot springs at Henry Clay Inn. And I'm like, I've been in this town a long time. I've never seen a hot spring. Somebody was boiling water and pouring it out back.
or Henry Clay Inn might have been somewhere out in the country.
Maybe, but I think it was in basically that spot. Where
it actually burned down.
Burned down. Yeah, I think it was there originally. But anyway, it's even in the country, I haven't seen hot springs. So
some false advertising.
Yeah, that's perhaps. Right. But they had a racetrack. It's race course lane is where the racetrack was, and so they were attracting people to come out. And those homes on the tracks were summer homes. And so they're built. Actually, they do stay very cool in the summer, but in the wintertime they can be pretty frigid.
Well, they're bigger homes, and they didn't know how to really deal with that when they built them.
Right.
Yeah. So raising kids here, I imagine you have fond memories of raising kids.
Oh yeah, it's a great town to raise kids in, and for the kids. I think we could still sort of turn the kids loose and let them run around town, and come home when it was dinner time and all that stuff like we did when we were kids.
Right.
And I don't, people with my kids' age anyway didn't have that experience much, and then all the kids' sports, and get to know the other parents from school and sports, and that's how I met Silent Rob. Was our kids playing sports together, or I'm sure we met at some point at kids, but he sounds like you were too, one of those private school kids.
We were both private school kids. Yeah.
So
we actually went to arch rivals.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go.
It's all good.
Yeah. So
did you? And I imagine your kids did this too. I know I did it, and I'm sure Rob did it. When you put coins on the tracks to have them run over, was it a penny every time, or were you using nickels and dollars?
Oh no, I was a poor kid. It was a penny every time, but as a kid I never could find the things. I don't know.
Because they blew away, or the track took them wherever. Yeah.
That's right.
I think I found like half of them.
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, it just took a while to search. I wasn't that patient.
I didn't. I don't think I did it that many times as a kid.
Yeah,
you would think you'd do it more often if you grew up that close to the tracks.
Yeah.
But I only did it.
It gets boring after a while.
Yeah,
I do remember my kids would, I'd have birthday parties and have 14 boys over or whatever, and the trains would come and 13 boys would run to the fence and watch the train, and mine are like, what's going on? What are you doing?
And when they had sleepovers, the kids are waking up every time a train comes through, and your kids are no problem. They're asleep.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I lived a block off the tracks, and I used to say that to friends that would come over, and they'd be like, "Hey, did you hear that train last night?" I'd be like, "Nope, sure didn't."
That's right.
So, no clue.
They'd be like, "How did you not?"
That's right.
And pennies, I'm with you guys. They were hard to find. I guess that had something to do. They were pretty close to the same color as the tracks. And
the
nails
gravel
and everything. Yeah. So we should have been smarter and used silver.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's talk about some fun athletes that you've worked with. Kevin Mitchell's a good name.
Yeah.
Didn't work directly with Bonds, but it sounds like you knew people that interacted with him.
Yeah, and I really don't like to use client names very much. I sort of got...
where they're safe to use.
Yeah, and I sort of got famous, I guess, as a sports lawyer from representing Kevin Mitchell. So, my name, came up with his, I guess, so because he was my first famous client. And so I don't feel real... And he's just a great guy. He would be perfectly fine with it, but others are more sheepish about it. But I've represented some, great players. Really, I've started off in baseball with Kevin, but what I did was ended up just getting a piece of business litigation with a agent and his players that invested in a building in Richmond.
I was going to ask you how you connected to Kevin Mitchell or any of the other athletes.
So his agent was the one, and right about that time, he was. Ended up having this trouble that we had to sue the Japanese team. So I'm like a 27-year-old lawyer, suing this, the Fukuoka Dai Hawks in Japan, and we sued them in district court in Los Angeles.
You never saw that coming, did you?
No, I did not. Did not see it coming at all. And so it was, a great experience for me, and got to get a little bit of notoriety that way for kind of a big case for big name player, and then kind of went from there. But I did a bunch of baseball for a long time, mostly because that agent, but got to know other agents who would send me their players if they needed legal help. And then Richmond is really actually kind of a mecca for golf agents in particular. There was Vinny Giles, who's a great amateur player, became a super agent, just represented everybody. And Pros Inc. was his company here in Richmond. He sold out to Octagon. It's been at least 15 years now. But he had, it seemed like everybody, pre-Tiger Woods, Tom Kite, Davis Love, Curtis Strange. It was, all the names he represented. And a guy that had been with him but broke off from him doing his own practice that had a great book of players named Dave Merrigy, an agent. He and I became friends, so I started representing golfers a bunch and represented a bunch of guys on the PGA Tour for a long time. And then somehow it became football. I don't really know where or how the switch came about, but the NFLPA is in D.C. Most of their arbitrations are held in Alexandria, where their arbitrator they like to use a lot is in Alexandria. And so, nationally, the football agents thought I lived in a suburb of D.C. I didn't ever tell them I didn't, and I'd go up there and do their arbitration. So I did, a bunch of those for a lot of players and a lot of agents, just disputes between players and agents or certification issues for agents. And so
because the agents have to be certified by the NFL, right?
By the PA, by the Players
PA.
Association.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, the way it works is that the union in any labor situation represents the players, and so the union delegates their authority to the agents to negotiate wages for the players.
So they want to make sure they're certified and they understand how everything should work.
Yeah, that's right, and also that they're not the kind of people that are going to steal from the players, and that they know what they're doing. Baseball is tremendous. I loved working with the baseball union. They are really, really smart, really good at what they do. All the unions are, but baseball is just incredible at how good they operate. And so they're very strategic about everything they do, and they want the agents to be on board and understanding how it works, because the agents, if I'm able, I'm not an agent, but if an agent is able to negotiate a better salary for one player, every player benefits, right? Because
the tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. And if somebody messes up and signs a bad deal, same thing.
Tide's going down for people.
That's right. And so they're very good about making sure everybody knows what they're doing and doesn't screw up a deal.
That's great.
Yeah. And they really are very powerful for the players.
I'm very happy to hear that, actually.
Yeah. They're really good.
Because the owners are making plenty of money.
Oh, they are. Yeah. So
golf, football, and baseball.
Right.
Are you touching all three sports these days?
Yes, but it's mostly football these days.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean,
and ironically, you didn't play.
No, I didn't play. Never did play, really.
Yeah.
I played on the Randolph-Macon field or on the the Science Center field, but yeah, I never played organized football.
Have you intersected with concussions and CTA and that sort of thing?
Tons of it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, I was meeting with a client about it this morning. It's pretty horrible, actually, what a lot of the players are going through. I've represented some of the guys who have committed suicide, who have shot themselves in the chest. I assume because they wanted to preserve their brains so somebody could check it out, what was going on with them. But it's really sad and interesting to see these, really big, great athletes. Most NFL players are really, really smart because you have to be. May not be book smart, but
they're elite in a lot of ways.
But to make it in that league, if you're an offensive lineman in that league, you got to be so smart, because to know where you got to be on every play from, they'll play different positions because somebody gets hurt.
Yeah,
it's really incredible how smart those guys are. And then your brain gets sloshed around enough. You get this CTE, and they lose emotional control is a big part of it. And it's really kind of scary. And some of them can't maintain a family because it's dangerous. And they're really nice people who just have these episodes because of the CTE, and they can't even diagnose it until you're dead. The only way to diagnose CTE is by autopsy. So it's scary stuff.
Are players, and I'll actually ask your perspective on all ages, like, do we do a good enough job as a society letting younger players play football? And my son played football when he started playing contact when he was 6 or 7. It was his choice. I certainly didn't say you have to go play because it's a family tradition sort of thing, but he played. I don't know, at the child level, we do a great job of letting folks understand what the risks are. I wonder what it's like at the college and pro level. Are these guys eyes wide open? We understand the risk, and this is the way we're going to provide for ourselves and our families, and so we're balancing risk and reward.
These days, I think at some level it's got to be. I'm not going to say every one of them, particularly at college level, is educated about it, but I think that they have to know that there's some danger in it now, and it's such a big difference now how big and fast these guys are that they just weren't 20 or 30 years ago. And when you have a massive body going really fast that stops really fast because it's another massive body going really fast, the brain just hits the front of your head. That's all there is to it. And I don't care what your helmet is.
And there's no helmet technology on earth that's going to stop that from happening.
No, not in football. And so I think people now know what they're doing, the risk that they're taking when they do it. I'm sure they don't think about it. None of us do as 18 to 22-year-old kids or boys anyway.
Yeah.
We don't think about that. The NFL players, I'm told now that they've done surveys and most NFL players won't let their sons play football. So
it's wild, right?
Yeah. So a lot of them have made a good amount of money because they've gotten themselves out of a situation because they played football, and their kids don't have to.
Right.
Because I think that's how they view it, as something they have to do. Now they love playing, don't get me wrong, but they know the danger.
It's a fun sport to play.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch.
Oh yeah.
It is absolutely entertaining.
Yeah. But there are gladiators these days, right? We love watching the hard hits. And, and they're getting hurt out there, and I do wonder what the future of football is. It's hard to imagine it going away, but we're getting some really messed up people as a result of it.
We might see it in our lifetimes. Our kids probably do see the end of football with such, I'll say, horrific blows to each other.
I think we will. And sometimes I wonder if they wouldn't be better if they took the pads off. Rugby players don't do that to each other. They tackle in an entirely different way.
They don't hurt their heads. They hurt their knees, but they don't hurt their heads.
Right. That's right. So
yeah, because you're making a decision wow, I might crack my skull if I go this hard.
That's right. Well, and people aren't designed to do that, right? But if you have that helmet on, you feel like you can do a lot more.
You can do whatever.
Yeah.
Well, so when you're working through an agent with players, and it comes down to the player versus the team, or the player versus the league, perhaps, or is it really just player and team?
It's usually player versus team. Sometimes it's player against the league in a disciplinary issue, right? The commissioner. I see that a fair bit too.
You do not have to answer this question because I don't know if it's problematic for you, but at what point do you think over half the players have some sort of CTE problem? 2 years in the league, 4 years in the league? Does 70% of them come in with CTE issues, or there's no real way of knowing?
To me, there's no real way of knowing. It's such, develops over time, and everybody's different, right? I think some people can play their whole career and not have a problem.
It's weird, right?
And then some get the problem real quickly. But
yeah, and you don't really know that they had the problem until after they've died.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't diagnose it anyway. You have
indications.
You can tell, yeah, but you can't know for sure. So
yeah, it's a lot of guys have committed suicide.
Yep.
And I think a lot of it maybe 15, 20 years ago was underreported quite a bit.
Yeah, but once Junior Seau committed suicide, that was really the first one that everybody stepped up and took notice. Wow, there's something going on here. But you're right, there were a number of them that had committed suicide before that. And they were struggling with life because of brain injuries, I think.
Yeah.
But, we don't know.
Life's hard enough.
Yeah. That's right.
Right. Not being able to control your emotion, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And when you're that big, you become pretty scary to the rest of society.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So football. That's funny. Your stepfather was a football coach,
right?
And you didn't play, and then you end up being pretty heavily involved in that profession.
Yep.
That's wild.
Yeah. A little interesting. And honestly, my stepfather, being who he was, had nothing to do with it. Pretty famous football coach, really, at least for being here at Randolph-Macon, and had no connection to anything to me ultimately getting to. It's really ironic.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that first agent that I represented, went to UVA, played both football and baseball there, and he comes out and says he's going to be an agent because he grew up as a great Pennsylvania, around Philly area player, and he knew all these people who were going to the major leagues and were going to go to the NFL. And he said, I'll represent all my buddies. He never represented one person that he knew growing up. He had to start all over. And,
wow.
So it's just kind of the way things develop.
A lot of agents have law degrees.
A lot do.
And so they can play both roles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Interestingly, as I tell my law students, it actually might put you at a disadvantage because legal ethics are a much higher level than sports agent ethics.
Yeah.
And if you can get disbarred if you don't follow legal ethics. So
you mentioned you're an adjunct professor. I think you have 3 classes that you're actively doing today.
It's only one class at University of Richmond, one a year.
You've had one at VCU though.
I've taught a sports law in their sports management program. I've taught at William & Mary in their law school. Taught the sports law class there for a while, but it was just too far to drive once a week. But I taught trial skills at Richmond for a while until Bob Shepard, the sports law guy, retired, and they asked me to take over sports law. So
you're doing sports law at U of R now.
Yeah.
So have you been pulled into all those adjunct professor opportunities, or did you seek them out?
No, I've pretty much pulled into it. The trial skills one, I mean, somebody asked me to do it, but I was, I thought that'd be a lot of fun, so I jumped on it. But and then the sports law is great. It's really fun to go talk sports with the students, and I get a lot of former athletes in the class, and it's interesting people, so I enjoy it. But it wasn't something I was really seeking. So,
but you're doing it, and you've done it at 3 different institutions. Are you lecturing primarily, or is it a good mix of lecturing and then a lot of grading of work? Or are there people that help you with grading of the work?
There are no people that help with grading the work, but at law school, there's actually very little grading. Almost all of it is a final exam or a final project. I always do a negotiation project for my students where they negotiate a sports deal of some sort.
Are you on the other side of the negotiation?
No, they negotiate with other students,
okay.
And then they present to me what they've done. So I grade their projects, but it's
so intellectually hard and stimulating, but not a ton of work outside of the lecturing and the final process.
That's right. Yeah, it's not. I mean, the lecturing is all on cases, and the cases are pretty much the same every year. So I have to read them every year. In fact, I laugh and tell the students that I know I'm the only one who's reading all the cases every year, but I feel like I need to be updated on, remember all the cases pretty well. So some of them I love. So it's, they're really fun cases that are like Jerry Tarkanian's case against the NCAA is just great because he got fired by UNLV, which is a state actor, because the NCAA told UNLV they had to fire him. And they didn't want to fire him. And they considered actually leaving the NCAA as an option because they said they had to fire him. And ultimately they have to. And so Jerry Tarkanian's lawyer shows up the day after he gets fired in state court in Nevada and moving for an injunction saying, let him keep his job while we sort all this out. And so, of course, I can see the lawyers for UNLV, who are the party getting sued on the other side. Yeah, Judge, why don't you enter that injunction? Because they want to keep him as the basketball coach, right?
And he's a great recruiter and
and they're going to the Final Four a bunch, and so he so they kept he got an injunction, and that was 1977. The Supreme Court finally decided in 1988 that the NCAA that had been dragged into it wasn't a state actor, so he didn't have a constitutional claim. He lost his case, but he remained basketball coach at UNLV for 11 years. So I just love that case because it's great lawyering, right? The lawyer won, and then he ended up going to coach for San Antonio and the pros. But
and he also, during those 11 years, might have gone to the Final Four at least once.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. I mean, a really successful run there at UNLV.
Yeah,
so
they were undefeated in the early 90s, and they lost to Duke in the finals.
Yeah, that's right.
Or maybe it was the Final Four game. I can't remember which, but it was Duke had no business beating UNLV that year. No basketball.
So, no, I mean, there's an occasional basketball athlete I'll represent on some business issue or whatever, and I've represented women's billiard players and luge and all sorts of interesting sports on different things. But luge, I had an Olympic athlete on a sponsorship deal that I represented, and so I'll do different, lots of different sports here and there. And so I have done a little bit of basketball, but that's not been a primary area for me.
Is it usually about how much they're getting paid and how they're getting paid, or are there other clauses that they care about that have nothing to do with the financials directly?
A big one that you see is the morals clause, where it's come up a bunch lately, where a player does something that may not be consistent with the product, and so the sponsor wants to cancel the deal. And I've had a lot of disputes over morals clauses, whether somebody violated it or not. And the interesting thing is, on the front end, negotiating them, the sponsors almost don't care. They'll usually start off with a clause that says, if you do anything that brings a bad image on the brand, we can terminate the contract. Which, is that getting divorced? Is it, obviously lots of bad things, commit a murder, that's going to do it, but it's getting divorced in some people's eyes would be. And so I've done lots of times negotiated those and wrote back very detailed things, commit a felony or misdemeanor, moral turpitude or something, and they always accept it. It's funny, I never have had anybody push back.
Wow.
And so but that's a big one. And then it's a lot. I've represented a lot of coaches that have been terminated over the years. In fact, in basketball, more than anything, actually, coaches get terminated, and then the school doesn't want to pay them on their contract, so we've had to sue in some form or fashion, things like that. So.
Does that happen a lot, where the school doesn't want to pay post-firing?
Well, usually they try to find some way to negotiate it down.
A settlement, effectively.
Yeah, and I will say, I won't use the coach's name, but he was national champion coach, and he was coaching at a state school in Tennessee a few years ago. And most people may not know it's a state school, but it's Memphis. And they terminated him because they wanted to hire Penny Hardaway, and who had never coached even a high school team. He had coached an AAU team. Great
player.
And great, and their best player ever. And so they terminated him and just made up reasons to not pay him. And I will give him a lot of credit. The school refused to pay him. It's a state school, so the Attorney General's office took over as soon as we sued. And the Attorney General's office, the lawyer in that office, as soon as he looked at it, called up and said, "Yeah, we're not fighting this. We're gonna pay you." So they paid the coach.
How'd you get involved in that?
His agent.
Okay.
His agent called me in. Yeah.
So you're like a top 5 sports lawyer in the country?
Oh, I don't.
Top 20?
They don't have a ranking. I have no idea. I do sports law. I have no idea where you.
Based on what we're talking about, in my deep and broad knowledge of sports, I know nothing about the law. I'm going to put you in the top 25.
I don't know. I have no idea. Certainly know a lot of other sports lawyers out there that do it full time, and I represent lots of other people and businesses and things. I do the general business litigation. Sometimes it's most of my practice. Other times sports is most of my practice. So,
are you exhausted at the end of each day?
No, I'm usually charged up actually.
Yeah.
So
the work charges you up.
Yeah. That, and I do get exhausted because I run with this group in Ashland at 5:30 in the mornings most mornings. but it charges me up. So.
How far are you running?
Somewhere between 3 and 5 miles most of the time. I'm not
good for you.
Not a long distance runner.
No knee problems, no hips,
no, because I just started becoming a runner late in life.
Okay.
Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I started running seriously. So
you definitely are a morning person.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, I'm going to ask you a fun question that we ask most of our guests. It's a little. I was going to say it's a little out of left field. It's very out of left field. One time only, you're a talk show host.
Right.
It can be a daytime show. It can be a late night show. It can be whatever you want. It sounds like it'd be a daytime show for you since you're a morning person.
Right.
You get to pick your guest. Your guest can be alive or dead. They can be famous or not famous. You can know them or not know them. You can go for ratings. You can go for thought-provoking. You can go for whatever you want it to be. You get to have a male guest, a female guest, a musical act, soloist or group, and if you're into stand-up comedy at all, you can have a comedian. Come on, who are your 4 or 3 guests?
Well, I don't know. I've thought about this question some, having listened to this podcast.
So
before.
you're one of the few that has actually listened to the entire episode.
Right. So I feel like I have to say Jesus, right? So
that's a pretty common answer.
But then I was thinking about it. I think if you want to have an interesting talk show, right? What I'd love to see is Jesus and Donald Trump. I just think that would be fascinating.
You're gonna Are two males? Is one replacing one of the other three that I've laid out, or we're just adding?
Politicians wasn't even on the list, but I don't follow rules, right? So
fair
you want an interesting talk show? That's what you got. So it's I should say this. This is also very public. But I've been representing Jerry Falwell in his battles with liberty. And I am so fascinated by that school and the religious right. And, I'm very moderate politically and certainly not in the religious right. But it's so interesting to observe how all that goes on for me.
I think if Jesus and Donald Trump were on your talk show, my head would explode about 5 minutes in.
That's right. That's right. So,
all right, female. Do you have a female for your show, or is it just going to be the Jesus and Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, you can add in Ann Coulter or my law school classmate Laura Ingram if you want to make it really interesting.
Okay.
But yeah, it's no there. I mean, hadn't really thought about female, and I guess I'd maybe with that group put in Willie Nelson if you're going to go with a musical act, just to make we're going to.
He's still doing it too.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Still just showing up on commercials. So
yeah, he's still making money too.
Yeah. Yep.
What about comedy? Are you a fan of stand-up comedy?
I am, but I can't say that. I mean, the people I would say. Well, I think Ron White is hilarious. He's kind of
his timing.
dated.
His timing is impeccable.
Yeah, he is my favorite, but he's been around for a while. So.
He's still doing it though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah.
He got out of it for a while, and then I think he got pulled back in.
Yep.
And he loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ron White's hilarious.
Yep.
Wow. So Willie Nelson, Donald Trump, Jesus, and Ron White, and possibly Laura Ingram. And
I'm just trying to come up with somebody who would be interesting.
That would be an explosive show.
Yeah, that's right.
I think everybody'd have to tune in.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of love and hate, I think, from the audience.
Right.
Potentially.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
All right. Tell me about your boys.
So my oldest Trey is living in Miami. He went to University of Miami and graduated a few years ago, and started a business while he was a sophomore in college, and sold a whole bunch of shoes on the internet. And COVID hit, and his business really took off. So he sold it and retired for a while. He's now bought another internet business and is just starting up again. So with something he bought that was already in place instead of a true startup. But yeah,
he's an entrepreneur.
He's an entrepreneur. He's doing great. He's doing all sorts of investments around, Miami. A lot of them are tech based. And then my middle one, Bailey, is a senior at the University of Utah in the video game design program. So he graduate in May and hopefully get employed in that field. And then my my youngest son is a junior at University of Miami. Followed his oldest brother down there, and he's the crazy one. So he's having a great time down there. So
crazy because he's the baby and maybe got away with some things that the older two didn't get away with.
I'm not sure anybody can explain why Cal's like Cal is, but he's tons of fun. There's no question, and everybody loves Cal because he is Mr. Entertainment, and a great sort of sports story too, because he was going to be a football player like his stepfather. He was always very connected with my stepfather, his grandfather, and in fact, my stepfather's number was 11, and Cal, even when we had him in Little League, I'm looking at Silent Rob here, who we draw numbers randomly, and he'd get number 11. It was like, my stepfather had passed away then, was pulling it out of the box.
Yeah.
And my stepfather always said, don't let them play organized football until they get to high school. Just no sense, and you can learn everything you need to know from high school on. And so Cal goes out to Patrick Henry and starts doing August two-a-days, comes home after about day 3 and says, this sucks. And the kids in the gym are playing volleyball, and they're going to win a state championship. And I'm like, Cal, Patrick Henry's won 1 state championship in football. And they're not going to win the state championship, but go do whatever you want to do. And lo and behold, they won the state championship, and now it's 7 in a row. And Cal was regional player of the year and team MVP, and was he played on the varsity team for 3 of the years he was there from his sophomore year on, and really cool experience for him, but lots of fun. So
always fun to win. So your oldest goes all the way down to southern Florida. Your middle goes to Utah.
Right.
Were they just like wanted to get out and experience the world and didn't want to be home?
Apparently wanted to get away from me. I don't know, but no, I don't think so. No, they just, my middle one did go to Mary Washington for a while and transfer to Utah because the video game design program is really strong there. The other two, I think, wanted to go to, Trey, pretty brave. He went to South Florida, didn't know a soul.
Yeah,
and
it's very brave for an 18-year-old.
Yeah, and he went down there, and it took him a little while to adjust, but once he did, he obviously did great. And then I think Cal wanted to go there probably because his older brother did. So they didn't actually overlap. They were exactly 4 years apart, but Trey was down there living in Miami when Cal went to school. So
and if Cal needed anything, Trey was around.
He was there, yeah. So
it's really cool. All right, two last things. I'm really sorry I forgot that you didn't live in Ashland from like the age of 3 on. I actually forgot Rob didn't come to the town of Ashland until you were 5 or 6. Yeah, I forget that all the time too. But of course, I don't have any memories before the age of 5. Last story about a sports person that you've worked with that would be enjoyable for our listening audience. Do you have one more in the pipe for us?
I don't know that there are any really good ones that come to mind. I've had lots of interesting sports experiences. I can talk about the Ashland one here. Not a great story, but we had an embezzlement at the Ashland Little League, and Silent Rob here discovered it, and interesting experience for me to go through as a former. I think I was probably off the board by then, but they called me and I had to sort of act as pro bono lawyer to help guide everybody through it. And of course, Rob's the expert on the criminal side, but really interesting experience there.
Who embezzles from a little league?
I won't use names, but. We had
apparently somebody does, at least one person.
It actually happens. You see it a lot.
It's shocking.
Yeah.
You hear about it in the news quite a bit. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and until you live through it, you probably don't pay that much attention, and then once you see it, you see a lot of it. So that's
a interesting and sad story to end on, because that bothers me that people do that. It's just kids playing sports,
right?
And you're trying to benefit in some sort of illegal, borderline immoral way.
Yeah, that's
a bummer.
Yep, it is.
You're gonna keep working. You're gonna keep doing a lawyer thing.
Till
you.
Well, I don't know.
Anymore?
I don't plan to fall over at my desk, but I love it. I do. It's incredibly stressful, but I do love what I do. So I'm going to keep doing it for a while and then try to figure out how to slow down.
There's juice there every day.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and people would ask me what the plan for my day is, and the response is the day's got a plan for me. I have no idea what's going to happen any day, and including, you just every once in a while, for me, it's kind of incredible. I get a call from somebody famous I've never heard of before who said, I need you to represent me. And I'm like, and that happened actually with probably the most famous football agent. I actually thought it was my buddy screwing with me when a long time ago, and he calls me on my cell phone sitting at my desk. I'm like,
Lee?
Really?
The guy's name's
No, he was out of the business by then, but the one from South Florida.
Okay.
So so it was, it's interesting. Anything can happen. So.
You have lived a wild, amazing, fun, exhausting, challenging life.
Yeah, I've had some good experiences, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, Vern, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I learned a ton about you. Apparently, I didn't know as much as I thought about you before you got here. I knew a lot of the adult stuff, but I didn't know much about the childhood stuff.
I got something. I know this is Vern's episode, but I think I've actually told you this before, but when I worked at Kings Dominion, I organized all the sports activities. And I worked with your stepdad.
Oh, is that right?
Yep, when he was the AD at Macon, because we would always have our basketball tournament at Macon. So we would play the cross courts, whether we did a 3-on-3 or a full 5-on-5 or something like that. And you probably went to Kings Dominion a couple of times on me because I gave him tickets
probably so, but
for letting the use of the gym. So, but your stepdad was awesome.
And actually, if you get a talk show, host or whatever, and it's anybody living or dead, it's going to be him. I want on the list because he was probably the greatest human. I guess it's got to be Jesus, but he was a great guy. And I still have parents of kids he coached come up to me to say what an impact he had on their life, and he was just such a great guy and a huge asset for Randolph-Macon and Ashland. So
yeah, that's all most of us can hope to do is have a positive impact on others. And it
Yeah.
sounds like he had a lot of positive impacts on a lot of folks.
He really did.
yeah, he did. So
Well, cool. Thanks for doing this, Vern. I really appreciate it, man.
absolutely, thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.